Welcome, viewers, to Jazz Chat with David Friesen. And today we have a very, very special guest, an amazing musician and educator, or you could say educator and musician. He's equally great in both. Let me tell you what Wikipedia tells about Jamey Aebersold. He's an American publisher, educator, and an amazing jazz alto saxophonist. His play-along series of instructional books and CDs using the chord-scale system, the first of which was released in 1967, are an internationally renowned resource for jazz education. And I might add that his jazz workshops is the template for all the jazz workshops that are in existence, because I think when he branched out from Ken Morris and the National Stage Band, he started the combo clinics, and all the other combo clinics that have come up since then have patterned themselves after Jamey Aebersold, and I've been involved with so many of those, and I've never experienced what I've experienced with Jamey's camp. So Jamey Aebersold, welcome.
Glad to be here, David.
Good. Let me just open up with a question that people will be interested in. And I've asked Bright Game from Nigeria and a conductor from Kiev, Ukraine, the same questions all around the world. How are you coping? How are you coping as a musician and educator with this COVID-19?
Well, I started practicing more, that's for sure. And back in November, my wife and I both got the virus. Mine was very mild, but hers kind of took her legs out from under her, and she had to go to the emergency room back in November. And then we moved her to a nursing rehab facility for 2 months. Now she's been home about 8 weeks, and she's still using a walker. But the reason I mention all that is when she was gone for 2 months, I practiced every night for like 30 or 40 minutes or maybe an hour or so.
Right.
And I didn't have anything to do. It was a different world. I was eating out lunchtime and supper. Breakfast I eat here, but I was by myself except with Kendall Carter, who works with me. But I did a lot of practicing. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And I still been trying. Now that she's home, I still come down and try to practice 30 or 40 minutes every night. Practiced last night. And I realized how much fun it is to play, even though I'm not playing with people, but I'm expressing myself mentally, and it's actually coming out the instrument, and it's better than it's ever been. And I'm 81 years old.
It's very therapeutic, isn't it? Just to play.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I got these here, just for those of you that maybe have hearing problems, I got these hearing aids about 6 or 7 years ago. And only since the virus hit, have I managed to come up with a setting on them. When I play my horn, it sounds like it used to sound to myself, instead of sounding, you know, and it's like, ooh, boy, I hate that sound. So I really enjoy practicing and playing now. I'm looking forward to playing with people after this ends.
Yes, I hear you. Jamey, you have been a real advocate for people not smoking. In fact, you're intensely involved with this, and you share this with your students, the importance of not smoking. This is a good message. My question to you is, what started this? Why the involvement in this movement?
Well, I think about 30 years ago, a fella came up to me. I don't know if he knew I didn't like smoking or not, but I didn't really speak out on it, okay? But he asked me to come, and he was working for the Cancer Society. That's when every little town had a cancer organization. And I said, well, yeah, fifth graders, okay, I'll do it. So I went and talked to him. Then I realized I need to do more. So I took my saxophone. I got asked to do some more. Took my saxophone and played and talked about creativity and imagination and living long time, and the fact that smokers usually died about 14 years before. Then I got some lungs, and I showed them lungs, and I got some information and material. And then I started reading about Philip Morris and Brown and Williamson and Liggett Myers and other tobacco companies and how they were deceiving people. This was in the 90s, okay? Yeah. And that's when NPR would have something about smoking. And it got to the point where USA Today magazine, on their back page, where they had a little paragraph on each of the 50 states, and there'd be one or two a day, it seemed like, where some city across America was banishing smoking. So I really got into it and found out that Philip Morris and these companies had been deceiving us for years. So I said, well, I need to put my money where my mouth is. Mm-hmm. So I put up billboards. I did school programs and paid the musicians to come. We, instead of just me doing it, we got this, me playing sax, piano, bass, and drums. We'd go out with all these posters, pass out free books on non-smoking, which I probably have one right here called Quit Easy. I gave one out yesterday. I gave one out the day before when I was driving. I'd pull over and ask these people, I said, you ever try to quit smoking? And they said, well, I was at Kentucky Fried Chicken 2 nights ago. And the car in front of me pulled up. I guess they were going to bring the food out to him. So as I got my food and went past, the guy's, he's got his arm out the window smoking a cigarette, and his wife or girlfriend is driving. So I backed up, and he sees me backing up. And I reach out and I say, have you ever tried to stop smoking? He said, no. I said, would you like to? And he says, no. And she says, yes. I said, well, I've got a book. I said, here, would you like this book? I'm reaching over out of my car. And he says, no, I don't want it. She says, here, give that to me. And she grabs the book and takes it. I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars. I added it up once, and it's incredible what I've spent over the last 25, 30 years fighting the tobacco companies.
Well, I've heard your, of course, I've been teaching at your camp for several years now. And one thing I've really appreciated about you is you're very candid with the students. And, you know, we have a lot of young kids out there, and many adults too, but you're always open about sharing about non-smoking to these kids. Do you feel the same way about alcohol and drugs?
Oh, yeah. Same thing. You don't need it.
Right.
You don't need it. It's not going to help you, period. So just avoid it and go ahead and do what you want to do. And David, I've found that if you can get people at an early age hooked on playing music, but not just reading music on the stand, because that really limits you, and you don't get to use your imagination and your creativity. And that's where the fun is.
One of my Zoom master classes, of which no one showed up for, was about diet and not smoking and alcohol and how we are what we eat, and the importance of taking care of our physical body, because it takes so much energy and so much mental capacity to play this music. It's not an easy chore. And I mean, my dad raised my sister Diane and I on organic seafood in the 40s. We were eating raw yogurt. He was into health foods way back then. So I was very fortunate to be brought up in a home dealing with health foods and non-alcohol and non-smoking. So I've really appreciated you doing this. Jamey, I know that you studied with David Baker, who's a close friend of yours and mine, and what started you into jazz? I mean, what were your parents involved in the music, or how early did you start?
Well, I started playing piano when I was 5, because my brother, who was 4 years older than me, he got to take lessons the year before. And I was upset that I didn't get to do it, but I think they thought I was too short or something. But anyhow, the next year they let me take lessons. And I didn't know what it was going to be, and I'd never heard of really jazz. I grew up, my dad, we always ate lunch and supper together, okay? And we didn't really eat until we had our prayer, bless the food, but my dad would first put on a stack of 78 records in the living room. So while we're eating, we're hearing all these dance bands, not jazz bands, but Guy Lombardo and Sammy Kaye and blah, blah, blah. So I heard all these tunes, and I was a very, very slow eater, very picky eater. So I got to hear all the records. Little did I know that later on, when I got interested in playing, that I'd be playing some of these songs by ear that I'd never played before, but I'd heard them over and over and over while we were eating. But I think I read a magazine at some point. Well, I got fired from my piano when I was 10 years old. She gave me my money and told me, go on home. Said, Jamey, you'll never be a musician. You don't want to practice.
I was told that too.
Yeah, you were. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, then I made the natural switch to tenor banjo because my dad played banjo, and I took lessons on that. I took the bus by myself to Louisville, which you would never let a 12-year-old do today, unheard of. But yeah, I walked down to the bus station and take the bus and walk down the main street in Louisville and take a half-hour banjo lesson. And then I started playing saxophone. But when I started playing saxophone, I was in the 6th grade, and my mom and dad had bought a Hammond organ. I don't know if it was a B3 or not. But I can remember walking to school the week we were supposed to get this organ. And every day at lunchtime, I'd run home to see if the organ had and of course it had. On Friday, I didn't come home. Of course, the organ came. And when I got home from school in the afternoon, there it was. But I learned how to play chords in the right hand on the one manual and walk bass lines on the other one, which I still have the tapes that I made of several songs that I made. So that was my original play along, incidentally. And then, but along the way back there at some age, I don't know, 12 or 13 probably, I read a sentence in a magazine that said, jazz is the coming thing. And I said, well, if jazz is the coming thing, I better get down to the record store tomorrow and buy some records, which I did. And bought a couple 78s. And then right away, that was the early 50s, LPs came in. And I started buying LPs. And I've got about 14 or 15,000 LPs and CDs. I just really got into listening to music, especially bebop, you know, Charlie Parker and those guys, because I couldn't understand what they were doing. I started off with Dixieland because that was fun. My dad liked that, the Firehouse Five and Kid Ory and other people playing Dixieland tunes. But once I got into Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, et cetera, I was hooked. And what I was going to say was, 5 minutes ago, if you can get a kid interested in playing music and then get them right away improvising, like was my volume 24 record where you play on the B-flat major scale for 5 minutes, that's a good place to begin. But when you do that, I don't think you have to worry about them smoking, drinking, doing drugs, you know what I mean, stealing from people. I mean, they're going to, music becomes part of their life. And I think it's their originality, which everybody has, and their imagination and their creativity. That is this thing like we have, you want to play every day. And there's no end to it. It never ends. You never finalize it, but at the same time, there's no end.
Well, let me ask you this. It's a poignant question. Charlie Parker obviously was like a Mozart living among us. And that's what I think. And he was like just a phenomenon, right? And, but that wasn't enough. Being a genius at music wasn't enough to keep him from the drugs and the alcohol that eventually took his life. So there's got to be something more. There's got to be some foundation on which we build our lives using Charlie Parker as an example. Have you thought about that?
Oh, yeah. What a waste. What a waste. When jazz education came along, he would have been an ideal person in his right mind to go out to all the colleges and come to the summer jazz workshops, play, and show how he got to that stage, you know. But he died at what, age 33, I think, or 34, you know.
34,
so
I think,
it's gone. Yeah. Well, I've written about this several times, the drugs, and then what the opposite might be, which, of course, I think is like meditation and reading spiritual things and just thinking about life and what you can add to it. We'd like for everybody, every young person to become what someone said a long time ago, this was a kid over in Thailand that I had adopted. You pay $30 a month and he gets some food and schooling and this, you know, he sent a picture one time and on a postcard, I think it was, and there were all these bottles. It looked like 50, 60 bottles of Pepto-Bismol that some organization had probably donated. But what he said was, and I thought it was really interesting, he said, Mr. Aebersold, I want to grow up to become a necessary person.
Ah,
And when I read that, I said, wow, here's a teenager giving you a life lesson.
yeah.
Grow up, you know, to become a necessary person. And the drugs and the alcohol and this, that, and the other is not necessary. It's just not necessary. And it doesn't allow you to be creative. And that's what the jazz is all about, is creativity and using your imagination. Most people lead a whole life and don't use their imagination at all.
That's right.
Which is unfortunate.
Another question for you is, I remember when I first met you. Well, when I first met you was, I think it was 67 or 68 in Portland, Oregon, when it was the Ken Morris National Stage Band. Mary McPartland, John Laporta, Gary Burton, Lou Marini, they were all, and his father, they were all teaching. And I heard you play, and I thought, man, this guy is incredible. I mean, this guy could really play alto because very lyrical. I know you're thinking chord-scale relationships, but what came out was very compositional over the changes. It was like other melodies, beautiful melody. And then I became aware that you were involved in teaching. You didn't really pursue the playing aspect. You weren't making CDs and highlighting your greatness as an alto player. And I've always wondered. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's a fantastic decision, but I'm wondering why.
I'm just not quite ready yet.
Oh, okay. It's like I met this young Polish piano player. He was like 13. He came to stay with me for a couple of weeks in my home of Portland. His dad was from Colombia and his mother was Polish. Amazing, Marcin Masecki, an amazing player. I mean, he set in with my group and we were playing like Seven Steps to Heaven and Oleo and really up-tempo things. And he was just so calm on the piano and was using a lot of space, just not a lot of notes, but a lot of space. And then he was practicing on my piano one day and I says, what are you doing? He says, well, when I go back to Warsaw, I have to make an album of Rachmaninoff. I said, oh, no. Okay. So he went back, made this album of Rachmaninoff, and I think Chopin. Then a few years later, I was in Poland doing some concerts, and I met him. And I said, oh, Marcin, how are you doing? And we were talking. I was saying, have you thought about making an album of Mozart? And he said, I'm not that mature yet. So what you said reminded me of that story about Marcin. Yeah. Well, Jamey, I'm sorry, I would disagree with you about yourself. I've often wondered why you just wouldn't put out. You know so many musicians, and you could handpick your rhythm section exactly what you would want to do.
Yeah, I could.
But is it something forthcoming, or are you just?
Well, before this virus, we played once a week, pretty much. So you got 52 weeks in a year. I would say at least 35 to 40 of those weeks we played with a quartet with Jonathan, and I got 2 bass players I play, and a couple of piano players. Then we record that and listen to it. And there's some good stuff, and there's some stuff that's not so good, but it's just fun to play. I guess maybe that's an outlet, and that's kind of enough for me.
Wow. Well, it's interesting and humbling that you think this way. But the jazz community has been so fortunate to have a person like you involved. You've done so much for the growth of jazz. I'm sure this is not the first time you've heard me say this. Ending this interview, and it's been great. I mean, we could go on forever. You have a worldwide wealth of information, Jamey. But I'd like to have you leave our audience, the people that are watching right now, if you would please, with your words that will offer hope and encouragement to the people who are living in a broken world right now.
You know, well, I think just listening to jazz is really good. I mean, I always feel better after I listen to music. Of course, there's two ways to listen to it. You listen with the right brain and you enjoy it, this, that, and then at the same time, you're sort of analyzing. And I've gotten to the stage where oftentimes I'm analyzing and thinking about what these people are actually doing to achieve the sounds that they're achieving. Mm. And it's a lifetime of work, a lifetime of dedication. And I can hear that they've listened to other people. So it's you listen to the past and it comes through to you. And I think creativity and using your imagination is so important in the world today. So many people they're not imagining anything. All they're imagining is where am I going to sleep tonight? You know, where's my next meal going to come from? Where's my next piece of bread going to come from?
Yeah.
To be in this music and be in America and having gone through the virus, you know, with 500,000 people dead, and now we're still alive. It's like, well, we've got to, and these people that are going to be watching this too, you've got to contribute your musicality to what's around you at whatever stage you're at. You know, don't be constantly comparing yourself to others. I would like everybody to think of this. There's an organization called Unity. It's a kind of a church, but you can belong to other religions and go to it. Okay, it's Unity. And its a founder was Charles Fillmore out in Kansas City. And I have this thing on my my desk. And I have this memorized. He wrote this when they found it after he died in his desk. And he wrote it when he was 94 years old. 94 years old. Wow. So I've and I read this a long time ago. And I said to myself, I would like to be at this state of mind when I'm 94. It says, I fairly sizzle with zeal and enthusiasm and spring forth with a mighty faith to do the things that ought to be done by me. Charles Fillmore in his 94th year. Wow. I love that. And he was into spirituality and religion and so forth. I'm into music, you know, but that's the way I would like to be. There's a picture of he and his wife. Wow. Wow. Well, so he's had a profound effect on me. And hopefully this little session we're doing can have an effect on the people that are going to be watching it.
Well, Jamey, thank you for those words. It's been really a pleasure doing this interview with you and opening up and sharing some inside thoughts that you have. And what about your camps? That's one thing I didn't ask you. The camps are not happening this year.
No, two years in a row, David.
Go ahead.
2 years in a row.
So sad. The university is just not prepared to open their doors yet, are they?
They sent us a thing several months ago acting like the dormitories were going to be open. But I'm sure they don't want to take a liability for anything happening. I don't want to either.
Yeah.
It's just, everything is still too unsteady.
Yes, yes. Well, listen, I wish you well.
Thank you.
To all my fans out there that have tuned in, please be well, stay healthy, and God bless you all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Jamey.